The following program is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. For as low as $1 a month, you can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling a week early and more. You too would become cool, just like our trash elite, Rob, and a guy from Ohio, Kitty Holbrook, DG, On the Tip of Your Tongue, Destrucity, KTL, Passion Killer 711, Thomas Austin Jr., and Drake Starstorm.
That's 9.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow delightful Candyland Funko Pops. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
We enter year 11 of the Two Nerds podcast, and of course that means looking back on 2024.
We have 2 podcasts we have done pretty consistently for the last few years, the first couple podcasts of the year. They're basically just reviews of the previous year and looking back before we venture forth into new things.
It's a nice way to take a break because they're really easy to hammer out.
Yeah, we're going to be recording both of these literally right now, and then we have a couple weeks off of having to think about the podcast.
Will we use that time to get ahead on the podcast
Absolutely
or Journey of Wrestling?
not.
No.
That's not what it's for.
That's not how it works around here. Before we get into all that, we need to talk about what's crumpin'.
What is crumpin', brother?
Man, it's been the holidays still, so we've been pretty busy. I've gotten some Warframe in, but I haven't even played Veilguard in the last week. I've had opportunities to, it just hasn't been the vibe. I've been working on some stuff for Violent Profiles. That's also taken up a decent chunk of time. This last week flew by for not a whole lot happening.
Yeah, I played like a very small amount of Elden Ring just to relax myself. I'm having some personal issues that are making up a lot of my mental real estate right now.
His dick got too big, and with it his ego, so he just spends all of his time brushing his hair in the mirror and thinking about how hard it is to be so well endowed.
That's right, that's me, Narcissus with a fat cock.
God, what a great wrestling gimmick. Now that we've alienated a good quarter of you, so we do this every year. We talk about several categories that we decide, usually in a scramble, a day or two before we record this podcast. I did put in my due diligence to try to remember stuff. You did as well on a couple of things.
Yeah, there was at least one thing I remember at the time going, well, this has this category on lock for the rest of the year, and I was right.
I was wrong about a couple of those things. Now, we do also need to say that this isn't necessarily stuff that came out in 2024 that we're talking about as the best blah of the year.
It's not even necessarily stuff that we've first encountered in 2024. It's just stuff that is the best or thing we did that is the most emblematic of this year for us.
Yeah, that's what a good way to put it. So we're going to start out with video game, and I would be lying if I didn't say Warframe. I did not realize I'd sunk around 300 hours into that game until Xbox decided they're going to do a Spotify Wrapped, and it told me. And I went, oh, I might enjoy this game.
Yeah, it was a good game.
It is surprisingly good. I've tried to get into it several times before. This is the year it finally clicked. And maybe it's because I'm playing it on console, and maybe it struck at a time where I wasn't as paranoid about playing online with other people. I don't tend to like that. Call it damage from years of League of Legends, I don't know. Or WoW PvP. I do have some honorable mentions, and that is Dragon Age Veilguard. I'm not even halfway through it yet, so it's hard to say game of the year, but I am really loving it. Another Crab's Treasure, which was solidly my game of the year until I realized how much time I'd sunk into Warframe. If you guys haven't played it, it's a Souls-like that's about a cute little crab trying to survive in the ocean. It is a spectacular Souls-like. And speaking of Souls, the Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC bears mentioning, even though it's not its own game and is thus disqualified from Game of the Year. What about yourself, my friend?
For mine, Game of the Year was WoW. It's basically the same argument White had. I was playing a decent amount of Warframe, and then I got back into WoW, and then it ate several months of my life. Not to the unhealthy degree that it did back in the day, when I was playing it originally and I was much younger.
And much less employed.
Yeah. But it became like a good thing to do, a nice relaxing game that wasn't too difficult, that wasn't too much mental effort, and was a fun thing to do with my friend for a while, and then Warframe took over for WoW. for him for a while.
Really, truly, what happened is that I put a lot of effort into beating the new expansion, and I was so burnt out after that even the basic, gameplay loop of WoW was not fun. I needed a break.
You needed a break.
Yeah.
And, like, it's just been the thing that I have played the most this year in terms of video games. And it was a good time, so I think it takes the top spot. I have a couple honorable mentions of Warframe, which I did play a fair amount of before I got back into WoW. And Shadow of the Erdtree, which probably would have taken my Game of the Year, but it is sadly not qualified. It's not its own video game, it's a DLC.
It might have. I didn't even evaluate it on that metric, though, because it's... Okay, if you could access Shadow of the Erdtree without completing most, if not all, unless you're some sort of gaming god of the core game for Elden Ring, then I might think more about qualifying it. But it is completely integrated into the core game.
I was memeing on your meme earlier. I that is actually no impediment to me. WoW one because I played it more. Also, thank you for the compliment. I got into Shadow of the Erdtree before I beat Renala.
My ass is literally still stuck on Renala on my new build. I'm mad. I'm mad at Elden Ring. Can't play it anymore. Anyway.
You just gotta go beat Radon and Mo. That's not hard.
You just gotta go fuck yourself. Alright, so... Moving on to the movie of the year, why don't you start us off with this one, my friend?
Yeah. Honestly, I look back as we were wrapping up the year, and in movie homework, it'll become clear that the first movie we watch every year is pretty locked in. So I already knew on like the last day of the year that I wasn't watching any other movies. So I look back at the whole year and I realized there was only one movie this year that really made me like actually viscerally happy, and was like, there were a lot of movies I enjoyed. There were a lot of movies I enjoyed a lot. There should be another on this honorable mentions list, but it's a movie I've seen a lot when I was young, so I didn't know. I'm going to include it. I'm going to call it an audible.
All right, I'll type whatever.
But the only movie that made me yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got it. That made me really, actually, viscerally joyous this year was Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't know that it's the best movie I've ever seen. In fact, I know it's not, but it certainly was really fucking fun. And I needed some of that this year, and I got it.
What about those honorable mentions, my guy?
The honorable mention, the first one I put in was Mute, which was a wild movie that I'm not going to get into too deeply for a reason that might become clear in a moment. And the one that he just added without me actually telling him because he knew was...
I don't think. I know.
Was the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, which I watched again for the first time in at least 10 years this year. And I was forced to confront the fact that more than just holding up, it's really good. It's just really good. It's just a really good movie.
It's really hard to see the flaws if you don't watch it every year like I do. It was a late entry. I didn't put it on my list because it's not novel. It's a constant.
That's why I didn't initially put it on my list. But looking back, I hadn't watched it in like 10 years.
No, sure. Deadpool and Wolverine was my honorable mention. I'm not as attached to the source material, in this case that being the Fox Cinematic Universe.
I didn't think I was until I watched the movie.
You watched...
And then they watched the Green Day Time of Your Life at the end of the movie and, like, got a little choked up.
You watched most of those movies that were referenced, if not all of them. I haven't seen most of those movies.
I have not seen all those movies.
There was one or two that you missed out on.
I missed out on the Wolverine Origins movie that everyone hates. I just literally never caught it. Because I looked at it and went, bad.
You watched it. I was there. I left.
I did not watch this movie, brother.
You have wisely erased it from your memory.
And I did not watch Age of Apocalypse or whatever, the one with Apocalypse in it, because Darkseid ripoff is not really my favorite. I don't care about him, so.
But you've seen all the Blade movies, and you saw Daredevil.
Yeah.
So, like, you have more going into this, and I respect that.
I watched the old Fantastic Four movies. You're absolutely right. I've watched more than you. I just haven't seen them all.
Yeah. But I did like it, and it was probably, without this Patreon request, it would have been my movie of the year. And both of these feel weird because neither of them blew me away. They were just really solid films.
I don't know that I had a movie. No, I didn't have a movie that really blew me away this year.
I knew this was going to happen. I started this year and looked at the movies coming out and went, that sucks. I wanted to look forward to movies. Now, there are some things. We haven't gotten around to seeing the new Sonic movie yet. Would that have been my movie of the year? Probably not. But, you know, there just wasn't a lot I was looking forward to in film this year. I'm not a Ghostbusters guy, for example. There's some other big tentpole movies that came out, and I'm just not that guy. So, Mute is my film of the year, I guess. And I say that with a certain amount of derision, but it was a fantastic movie by a director I love. It just... Nothing like... I didn't leave any movie this year full of energy. And that's usually like the high watermark. Last year, my movies were Mutant Mayhem and the Super Mario Brothers movie. Super Mario Brothers movie was not a quality film in terms of like being a great plot or great storytelling. I had criticisms of that film in exactly that vein.
It left you feeling energy.
It left me feeling awesome. It left me feeling really hype, and that stayed with me, and it still stays with me. Mute didn't have that. It was just a really well put together story in a genre I like, with actors I like, and a director I like.
Well, aside from the director, I don't know or give a shit about that director. That's all true for me as well. That's why it's in my honorable mentions.
So yeah, that's our movie for 2024. Let's move on to TV/web show.
Yeah.
I got to give a special shout out to Agatha All Along. If you guys listen to our podcast on that. Speaking of which, we do have a podcast on Mute as well. If you want our more complex thoughts, it was a Patreon sponsored review, so that's there. Agatha All Along was an uplifting, just almost life-changing, maybe life-reaffirming. Maybe it just reminded me of a pair of shoes I love. But
I wish I got that experience out of that.
You and I come from different backgrounds. This is one
version. Of the... Agatha All Along, I think, is the sharpest example of the actual delineation between us as people in terms of, like, media that we watch that I've had in a long time.
Well, and general vibe and aesthetic and stuff as well. And then Geek Enders podcast. There are other podcasts that I've been listening to that I really enjoyed, but having half and often 3/4 of the old co-optional setup has just really been a balm for my soul. Getting to hear opinions from Dodger and Jesse Cox again, and you know them just doing goofy shit. It was something I didn't realize I needed as bad as I did. And Geek Enders came back this year. I think they are at, if not officially a full year, by the time this podcast goes up, they're like one episode short. So it's been an excellent ride, but neither of those can match the strength of Fallout.
Fallout was just really fucking good. I am a huge fan of the Fallout series. If you've watched this podcast, you know that. I've played Fallout 1 through 4. I have played all those games. And even if I had never touched the series, I would love this series. I'm almost certain, because I know people who have never touched the series who love this series.
Yeah, it's undeniable the impact it had on the gamer sphere, if you will. And the acting was great, the plot was great, the execution was great. I have no complaints about that show. We did a podcast on that as well, if you want some further details on that. But it, half a year later, still holds up and is worth watching. Now, I say that, and I haven't watched Secret Level. I haven't watched Season 2 of Arcane. So those might be on the list next year. They might be that mind-blowing for me. But this year, it's Fallout.
I have watched Secret Level. It's pretty good. It's not as good as Fallout.
What about you, my friend?
I'm gonna reverse the order. My entry into TV /web show of the year is absolutely also Fallout. There's just no burying the lead there. It was unbelievably good. So, despite many, many years of this not always being the case, it is still sometimes the case. So a part of my brain will always remember the dark times of video game adaptations. And so when one comes out that is genuinely a really good thing by itself, in addition to also being a great adaptation, it's baffling to me. It's surprising in the best way. My honorable mention is Vox Machina Season 3. White Raven did not like that as much as I did. I loved it. I think it was fine. It definitely was tonally different than the first 2 seasons. But I didn't mind that at all. There was another thing which would be here, but I put it in a different spot on the list. We'll get to it later.
We did full thoughts on Vox Machina Season 3. There's a guy I watch. Don't mention better content on your content, but I don't know that it's better. Super Geek Mike. He analyzes episodes of the original Critical Role right now. And I kind of backed off on him while I was watching and waiting to watch Vox Machina Season 3 because he was covering that content.
And you didn't want spoilers.
And I don't want spoilers, no. They did things so different this season. Every episode, I'm like, well, that would have been way better. Or, oh, that would have been horrible. I see why they changed that. It's a different beast. Same story beats.
It's much more of an adaptation than
really
from stage to screen direct than the previous season.
Yeah. So this moves into the self-indulgence category. In a self-indulgent podcast, our favorite tabletop role-playing game character of the year. That would usually be a Dungeons & Dragons slot. However, we've moved on from Dungeons & Dragons. We play some idiot's homebrew game called Wizards in White. Subscribe to Patreon at the appropriate tier. I think it's $10. And you, too, can play Wizards in Whites.
So it's not the self-indulgence tier. It's the advertising tier. If you subscribe to the Patreon, you get a whole raft of benefits that I believe are probably listed somewhere else in the intro. But you also get access to the Wizards in Whites rules. And I'm going to do a brief ad read for Wizards in Whites. Wizards in Whites is a new tabletop RPG designed by Eric J. Chucci. It is intended to be a throwback to the tabletop RPGs of yesteryear, of your youth, if you're of a specific age bracket. It is supposed to have a very old school, very open world, very adventure-focused feel, but with updated mechanics, taking the lessons that the tabletop industry as a whole has learned in intervening years since those bygone days. I personally think it does that very successfully. Wizards in Whites is excellent at giving the exact tonal beats it's designed for. So if that sounds interesting to you, if that sounds like something you might be interested in, I recommend the Patreon. Also, there's a slot for it in Discord, and we would love to hear more. We would love more feedback about design.
It's entirely playable. There's a lot of rules errata that aren't set up yet, and the book itself needs a lot of polish. I don't know when it's going to be able to be published, especially because art is either expensive or time-consuming. But it is entirely playable, and of course I'm around to answer questions if you have any, rules issues as often crop up. I'm very happy with it. It's one of those things where I've set up the mechanics for it, and when we're playing it, especially when I'm not running the game, and I see it working as intended, it just sends my heart aflutter. So that's what we played this year instead of Dungeons and Dragons. And we have moved into a far more single campaign that takes around 9 months to a year to complete method. So we don't have a lot of characters to draw from. Now, a couple of years ago, we did add the addendum that if you wanted to talk about an NPC you played that was very favorable, you could. And I think one year I had one as an honorable mention. But
I know for a fact I did previous years. But this year, not so much. I like, there were a bunch of NPCs I liked, but it was much more player-focused in terms of the focus of the campaigns that I was running. That's a fun thing about Wizards in Whites. I didn't need to do nearly as much work with NPCs holding up parts of the various bits, because the Wizards in Whites PCs are better able to spread out. They're better able to cover bases with the smaller parties we usually work with. So that's not nearly as necessary.
Game balance. It's one of my passions. So who was your character of the year, my guy?
My character of the year, by virtue of being the character I played most of the year, was Malcolm. Malcolm McCullough is a wizard, a necromancer, but more important than all of those things, he's the monarch from the Venture Brothers. So the Necromancer in Wizards and Whites has a trait where you can get a undead minion, a Draugr, and 2 and more if you have the appropriate traits thereby. And so I saw an opportunity for a guy with 2 henchmen. So I went through the fictional world for a guy with 2 iconic henchmen and I wanted to find one that was the right vibe. I had just recently played a different Wizards and Whites character for most of a year, who I believe was my character for last year's podcast, Sights the Orc. Yep. And that was also Wizards and Whites, if that wasn't clear. And I wanted a different energy. I wanted someone who was much less the party dad, who was much less the responsible party. I wanted kind of a shitlord. And then, lo and behold, my eyes perceived 21, 24, and the Monarch as a 3-man unit. So I played Malcolm McCullough with his Draugr, number 1, and number 4. What happened to numbers 2 and 3? We don't talk about that.
It's been really fun DMing for him as well. It's nice to take NPCs that we are both familiar enough with that we can kind of trade off in voicing them and describing their actions. Now, a lot of that comes from the trust of us being, best friends. But just having that at the table and being able to do that, switching off who's 1, who's 4, and still nailing the characters all the time, it really adds a lot of flesh to the background of the game. And Malcolm is a great character. He's a support caster. He does a lot of healing and shielding.
It's my favorite thing to do. As a wizard, this is something, when I was a very young man, wizard was about, draw a big fireball. Do the cool thing. Be the cool wizard guy. No. As the more I come to realize who I am, my favorite thing to do in video games, tabletop RPGs, healing, shielding, being the support. I love giving other players the opportunity to shine. It's crack cocaine. I don't know how else to explain it.
I enjoy that as well, and some of that actually snuck into my character of the year. My first Wizards and Whites character, Leo. I also did not want to play a dad. I fall into that slot rather handily, and I like it, but I just wanted something different. I've been doing it for a while.
We both tend to fall into party leader / dad because we yap a lot. I don't know if you've noticed that. So we're more comfortable yapping at the table, which means we end up talking to most of the NPCs.
But we're also more comfortable with the rules and, helping. And like you said, it's fun to showcase other players and let them have a moment to shine, while, we're the guy waiting in the wings clapping or whatever. Leo is a ranger, in that he wanders around in the woods, and he's actually... In Wizards and Whites, I've noticed this has been a delightful change. It has a system not unlike Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition's backgrounds called identities. And they have really come to the fore in almost every character. It's been an important facet of who that character is, much more than any time we played 5th edition. So Leo is an ecologist. He literally is like a tree guy. Trees and mushrooms. He is a mushroom. He's a big, giant, 6'5" mushroom man. And he doesn't want to hang out in the cities. He doesn't want to be part of your system, man. He just wants to take care of the trees. And he goes to the city to report, hey, your trees are messed up. That's going to be a problem. But I definitely didn't want to play this responsible character. So I gave him some drawbacks, if you will, that were cemented to make sure he wasn't going to take responsibility for anything. He is curmudgeonly. He is impatient. He is not a hero, even though he does often save the world. He does it begrudgingly and usually dragged by the other 2 party members.
So when I'm DMing, I have one kind of rough, general guideline that very recently, in the last couple of years, I have turned into an actual rule, which is make someone who wants to go on the adventure. Because nothing is worse for other players at the table than having to talk your character into doing the thing we're all here to do. It takes up time and table space, and it makes everyone feel like they're dragging you, the player, along for the ride, not you, the character. White heard all this and took it as a personal affront and challenge to his ability as a role player, and decided to make a character who was literally exactly that as the premise.
I did not take it as a challenge. It was not intentional in that way, because the point was for me to go on the adventure. I think this advice, to clarify, I'm not trying to crap on your joke. It's a good joke. That advice and that preference is to prevent people who are going to avoid the adventure or are, as the player, going to want cajoling into it, like, you gotta pay me more, or my guy just doesn't go along. You know, that problematic table behavior.
Look, he did it successfully, this thing he decided to do to vex me. But he did this, I literally said this sentence to him, and then he made Leo. If it wasn't intentional, it was subconscious.
It really wasn't, I swear to you. I get where you're coming from, though. Leo doesn't need much prodding. Just one of the other players to be like, come on, guy. And he's like, fine. But,
he did it successfully. Leo's a joy to have around. It's an incredibly funny bit. The other players like it, which is the important thing for me. They love doing the bit where they convince Leo to go on the adventure. They all think it's fun. So it's absolutely successful. He challenge completed, even if he did not intend to take it up.
Well, and a good, probably what is about halfway through the campaign at this point, I had to stop and be like, you guys are still cool with this, right? Because if you're not, I'm a real asshole.
And then the other players went, no, we think it's hilarious. Yeah. This is a great bit.
So moving along, as much as we like to be self-indulgent, we got a podcast to do here.
Hey, we're advertising.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer questions, too, in the comments or in the Discord, so just skedaddle on over there and let me know. The surprise of the year, we also sometimes call it the I Was Wrong Award. My honorable mention is the Techromancer video taking off. 27,000 views as of recording, probably with some, smaller digits there as well. That's insane. If what I was doing this for was to become YouTube famous and make YouTube pennies, that might have been the point at which I turned ads on for these videos and threw my hat into the ring. That's not the vibe here. I appreciate the Patreon support. It literally is helping me, live my dreams, but I'd rather go that route than corporatize. I don't know. I guess I'm just a little bit punk rock.
We like saying fuck.
Sure fucking do. But as much as that was a huge surprise, that video getting as much as it did, and Groove on Fight before it, Warframe. I've tried it so many times before. This year, I believe I tried it before, and it just didn't stick. Much like Dark Souls, that third time's the charm. 300 some hours.
Absolutely.
What about you, my friend?
The I Was Wrong Award actually is listenable to in the podcast this year. You can actually see me do it. The Learning Tree, Chris Jericho, is the thing I was wrong about this year. I was livid that he beat Hook for the FTW Championship because of various things that I explained in great detail. Mostly, it's that I didn't have faith. I didn't have faith that he was going to go anywhere good with that decision. I was wrong. I was just completely wrong. I got worked. Fully and completely worked by the Learning Tree Chris Jericho, fucking Hall of Famer and well-deserved. Because the Learning Tree is great. It's one of the best things in AEW. It's fucking hilarious consistently at all times. He's a great heel, and he's doing fucking the Lord's work. I just got fully worked. And I need to, as someone who is aware of both the internet's and my own personal tendency to, want to not admit when they're wrong about something. Although, I have much less of that. I actually really like being wrong about things. I still need to acknowledge when I got worked. Smart that I am, he fucking got me. And he got me good. Excellent work, sir.
Moving on to our activity of the year, what we did the most is usually our biggest qualifier for this. What about you, my friend?
My honorable mention is YouTube. It's almost always my honorable mention because I just watch a lot of YouTube. In the way that a boomer watches just a lot of TV, I watch a lot of YouTube. If I'm just sitting at my desk eating my dinner or like playing a video game or just chilling out, I probably have a YouTube video on, at least in the background. If I'm cooking food, I have a YouTube video on, on my phone, just sort of playing, and I'm just listening to it. I watch a lot of YouTube. It's nothing in specific. What I'm watching tends to vary from month to month, week to week, but I just consume a lot of stuff on this website that you're listening to this on. It's the thing I do instead of TV. My number one, however, is a thing that absolutely could have been in web show, but it's not, because it is the creative endeavor that the thing that isn't YouTube that I put the most time into, that isn't covered by another category like video game. I always read a lot, but this year there wasn't anything I was super blown away by. Nothing new, at least, that I wasn't already reading. This year, however, I finally watched enough of it, although I had been watching it for a couple years, to really fall in love with the website Dropout. Not just Dimension 20, which I had been previously watching, but the rest of their content as well. They really did just go and make me a television network.
G4's back, except, without all those issues G4 had, basically.
Yeah, essentially. I love so many of their shows, especially some of the newer stuff they came out with this year. Special shout out to Gastronauts. It's nice to finally have a cooking show I like again. The cat has decided to join into the podcast, and we love her for that.
Yeah, she's got stuff to say.
But this is in terms of like not a video game or hanging out with my friends. The thing I did, the best activity this year was finding out what new thing was available on Dropout and checking it out. Just checking out the new thing. Because at this point, I trust them as a network enough to just go, oh, I have never heard of this before or have no familiarity with this as a concept. I'm in.
For me, I've been working on Wizards and Whites. It's been less this year. Like I said, it's mostly done. So usually we'll play a session, and then I'll go in and make some edits, and that's that. But it did still take up a large part of my year, especially finishing things up at the early portion of the year. I wrote a book too, speaking of advertising, link in the description. Obviously what I did most this year was Warframe. And if to hear me talk about the game, it sounds like I almost don't like it. Like, I will bitch long and loud about stuff that frustrates me in this game. And there I am again 6 hours later. It's 7 p.m. I got to get my daily. But I think, honestly, ironically, what I did the most this year was listen to podcasts. I think I have 4 podcasts that I listen to, which is more than ever.
It's more than I currently listen to.
Yeah, it's the reverse of what usually happens with social media. I'll get on a new social media platform. I'll be like, oh, it's so great, you should check it out. He checks it out. I dip out. I've started picking up on podcasts, and you're like, nah, it's not my speed anymore. But much like you and YouTube, it's what was on in the background for me when I was doing other stuff a lot. Not much to say about it. It's just what I've been doing with my year, and we move swiftly along. To the anthem of the year is the title we give it to sound punchy. Song of the year, if you want to be a little more specific. Again, this isn't stuff that necessarily came out this year, but it was stuff that really defined our year and stayed in our heads, I guess. I do have to give honorable mention to Calla the Cat, I Go Meow, which was legitimately the only song this year that I gave a crap about. I sat on the floor listening to it on repeat for a good solid 10 minutes one day. And that's not how I do anything.
Because that's a TikTok, dude.
Yeah,
that's not
yeah. It's not even the extended one, just the first little bit. It was great. I don't know, it brought me a lot of delight. And there wasn't a lot of new music. Despite having access to Spotify, in the first half of this year, I was not vibing with anything. Old stuff, sure, but like I'm not just gonna repeat last year's entries. And then some stuff kicked off. I would be a fool not to point out 2 of the titans of the pop world, Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan. And while I can't really pinpoint any single song that I liked over the others enough to call it Anthem of the Year, my year after the halfway point was full of their music. The actual song of the year, I'm going to mispronounce this, and then he's going to correct me. Suzerainty is the name of the band. Polite Fiction is the name of the song. It's something that I found while listening to Spotify's AI DJ. And AI isn't always evil, see? And it's a good jam. It sticks in my head when I'm not listening to it. It usually comes up in my playlist along with a bunch of ELO and Blue Oyster Cult for whatever reason. I should also mention Dankmas, who seems to exclusively do Simpsons-related techno songs. I meant to have them on the list, and I just forgot. I discovered them this year, and I listened to a lot of it. Spotify said Polite Fiction was the song I listened to the most that wasn't something I had on repeat while I was writing a specific scene in my book, COLT REGAN, HALLOW'S Eve, available at fine retailers everywhere.
HALLOW'S Eve, yeah.
What about you, my guy?
So for me, the anthem of the year is... So I'm not a guy who listens to a lot of music passively. I use music for specific tasks, which is actually one of the reasons I can't use the Spotify AI DJ, because my AI DJ is completely cooked. I mostly use Spotify for DMing, so it's just instrumental background music.
That's what I use YouTube music for. My YouTube music is cooked. It thinks I really like the Red Dead Redemption soundtracks.
So I use both for various different tasks, because there's some kinds of things they're better at than the other in terms of like search algorithm. This is too much detail. You don't care. But
if you do care, let us know in the comments, and we can talk about it in some other podcast.
But they're both cooked. So I can't use any of their recommendations, and I mostly just listen to specific songs I like. And there are songs that emotionally affect me, like songs that give me the feeling, the goosebumps feeling that other people get from like really powerful vocals or various other things. I can't really explain what causes that reaction in me, but if something emotionally affects me, if a piece of music really does get me hype, make me feel very productive, something like that, I'm more likely to listen to it more for that task. In that way, Warframe's We All Live Together gave me like a really solid boost of like endurance in terms of like emotional turmoil or physical action this year. It just had the right message, it had the right tone. I'm not good enough at music to explain why this is happening. But I would listen to this song if I had a thing I didn't want to do that I needed to accomplish and it couldn't be put off anymore. This was the song that made me do that. And that's really powerful and it's really useful for me to have as a person. My honorable mention is Hanumankind and Call Me's Big Dogs, because it's just a fucking banger. Like, it's not deep.
I've caught him spitting a few verses here and there and wondered what the hell he was talking about. I think, as is often typical, I meant to sit down and listen to these tracks before we got here, and I forgot. Ironically, I missed We All Live Together because I was playing the game with other people in the room. I didn't have headphones on at the time to listen to it. I usually play Warframe on like volume 8 on my TV. I don't hear anything. So like I watched the cutscene, but it was soundless. And I keep forgetting to go back and see what the song was because everyone says it's awesome.
We're watching both of these songs before we move on to the next podcast. I'm not joking. We are doing that.
All right. I'm going to get a drink first. Wrestling event of the year. This one's going to be a short one. For both of us, it's AEW World's End.
Because it was the best fucking pay-per-view of the year.
We
have a podcast on it. Go listen to that.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like, there were other ones I liked a lot this year. World's End was the best fucking bell-to-bell pay-per-view of the year, and I don't know that it was all that close.
No. It was a rough year for AEW. And we just don't care for WWE in the same way anymore. It's not even like a tribalism thing. It just doesn't hit.
No, I want to be less indie wrestling pilled. I am sad that WWE style wrestling looks slow and sloppy to me now. I don't like that, but it is still the case, so I don't enjoy it.
I even went out and tried to watch a bunch of other stuff when AEW was really bad, and that taught me that AEW was still better than all the other stuff. So, speaking of, let's move on to Wrestler of the Year. I used to specify that I was not going to select MJF, but spoiler alert, neither of us did this year because MJF was mostly gone, and when he was around, he wasn't peak MJF.
I really like what he was doing, but I don't think that's disputable.
No.
MJF spent almost all the time he was around this year stuck in a storyline that was greatly reduced by the sad, fragile mortality of humans.
Now, he was one of your honorable mentions.
Yes, well, because when he was around, he was still banger. Me first?
Yeah.
My honorable mentions are MJF, Will Ospreay, and Jon Moxley. MJF and Will Ospreay, if you watch me watch me on the Discord, listen to me on these podcasts, you absolutely would assume that one of those two was going to be my Wrestler of the Year, because MJF is peak. He is, unironically, not a meme, a generational talent. The dude has nowhere to go but up, and he's already at the top. It's ridiculous. Will Ospreay was created in a lab for me specifically. I'm convinced he is an AI robot that was made to be the perfect wrestler for me. It's crazy. Jon Moxley is doing just straight up the best work of his career. I don't know what the internet is fucking talking about. The Death Riders is peak. Jon Moxley's promos are peak. This is absurdly good. It's great work. There is one other person who I wanted to put on here, but I saw his list first, so I was going to let him take the lead on it. That's a little preview for later. And then there's my actual Wrestler of the Year, Hangman Adam Page. Hangman Adam Page did not give me the most bombastic, over-the-top, in-ring action of the year. That was Will Ospreay. Hangman Adam Page did not give me the most wonderful nerd wish fulfillment moment of the year. That was also Will Ospreay. Hangman Adam Page gave me fucking Shakespeare this year. Hangman Adam Page gave me literature. He gave me fucking beauty and art. Hangman Adam Page is a storyteller, and people are sleeping on how good of one he is.
As much as I am laid devastated by his change in character, even from the periphery, I can go, this man is doing amazing work. I am sad he's not the guy I want him to be, but this is incredible, nuanced storytelling. And the guy's always working. Yeah, absolute credits to him. No argument with your choice there. My choices for runner-up are Willow Nightingale, because she had an incredible first half of the year, and I love her. And Jon Moxley. Not quite the I Was Wrong award, but
I think he doesn't deserve it because you always knew he had this available.
When we came to AEW, I'm going to try to keep this brief, my biggest frustration with Mox is that I had seen who he was before WWE. I saw him in WWE. And people told me now that he was free, he was the culmination of that potential.
He was the fusion dance of the John Good of old, the Jon Moxley of yore, and Dean Ambrose.
And then when I got to him, he was going through it. And he has been, in some form or another, going through it since. Whether that's been having to deal with Charles Montgomery Punk, whether that is having to carry the whole company on his back because everyone exploded, and really desperately needing a vacation, he's been going through it. When he came back and killed Bryan Danielson, and started the Death Riders, he finally reached that apotheosis. And it's been great, but it has only been like the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So he can't be Wrestler of the Year. So, much to my chagrin, my Wrestler of the Year this year is Chris Jericho.
That's the one that I didn't put on my list because I knew he was already on White's list.
I I doubted a little. I was concerned, but overall, I had faith that this new Spore of Jericho madness would be excellent. And it has been no notes. Even when the guy is barely on the show, just trying to trump up Ring of Honor support, he's doing golden work. Just simple heel stuff that nonetheless gets under everyone's skin. And he's doing it on purpose, and he knows exactly what he's doing, and I love it.
It's peak. It's amazing. It's great. It rips.
He's doing the professional adult equivalent of a schoolyard bully saying something to you that you know isn't true and is just meant to get your goat, and it does.
Because I fear not a man who has practiced one heel tactic 1,000 times. I fear the man who has practiced, or I reverse that quote. I'm dropping it. You get what I mean.
I fear Chris Jericho. He will trigger me. I think is
the
rest of that quote.
He will grin while doing it.
Yeah. It's been spectacular. Are there wrestlers I would have rather had be Wrestler of the Year? Powerhouse Hobbs, sure. Penta. But, hey, this is the hand we're dealt. And
we got to work with the year that the universe gave us.
I played the Joker. So let's conclude with our favorite Two Nerds podcast of the year. The second most self-indulgent of the categories, because you guys do get to at least experience these.
Hey. You can experience Wizards and Whites, too.
You could. Not our games. You don't live here. But
no.
My runner-up was the 90s sitcom tier list. It was really good. In a lame argument, it got a lot of views. Not the most of the year, but it got a lot. And it was fun. I had a lot of good times doing it. I had a lot of good times interacting with people in the comments. My favorite of the year was the Return of the Gauntlet. We meant to do another one. And we will probably get to another one this year.
But we actually had a Patreon explosion. You guys had a lot of stuff you wanted us to watch, and that's absolutely something we're happy about.
Yeah, that's priority. Not over this podcast and the next one. These take precedent. But Return of the Gauntlet was like a thank you to a friend of ours, someone in the Discord, one of the patrons. And I don't know. It was fun. It felt like kicking the old tires.
I would love to do more.
Yeah.
I actually really like that segment. I love being creative.
Yeah.
Being a critic and doing fun reviews about stuff is fun. It's fun to listen to and to create. But I like actually putting forth something positive into the world. That's nice.
This was our 10-year anniversary, so a lot of the podcasts we did were throwbacks to concepts from previous years. I'm just going to leave that hanging and ask what your honorable mention was.
My honorable mention was the second worst podcast ever. It's my honorable mention, one, because the title is absolutely amazing. Excellent work, sir.
Thank you.
And because it was a throwback to a concept we did a bunch way back in the day, and did before we started doing the Two Nerds podcast, which is just finding some random piece of internet ephemera to talk about and doing that. In this case, it was a quiz, a personality quiz. I feel like the best stuff we make is stuff we make when we're just trying to capture the thing that inspired this to exist in the first place, which was just the random conversations we have at 2 a.m. My favorite podcast of the year, however, was Based PogChamp Tedward Danson, goated with the sauce, no cap.
This was one of our Two Nerds Don't Go to the Movies podcast.
Which none of you watch, and that's okay. I do them for me.
They're great filler when we don't have Patreon explosions.
This was a delightful experience. The thing that caused this to be named what it is. And it is one of those things that is just me and my friend hanging out, looking at weird shit on the internet and going, huh,